Chapter 4, Mishnah 7. The Mishnah continues listing enactments made by the rabbis for the benefit of society. Our Mishnah and the next discusses situations where the rabbis prohibited a man from remarrying his wife after he divorced her. If someone divorced his wife because of her bad reputation, i.e., she was rumored to have committed adultery, and the husband mentioned at the time of the divorce that this was his reason for divorcing her, he may not remarry her, even if the rumor is proven false. Similarly, if someone divorced his wife because she had made a neder, vow, and he mentioned at the time of the divorce that this was the reason for divorcing her, he may not remarry her, even if the neder was later annulled by a sage. The rabbis were concerned that the divorced woman might marry another man and have children, and then the rumor will be found to be false or the neder annulled. The first husband might then say, had I known that the rumor was false or that the neder would be annulled, I never would have divorced her. Such a statement would imply that the divorce was a mistake, and thus she would not be married to the second husband, and her children from him would be mamzerim. Accordingly, for the benefit of society, the woman and her children, we tell the husband before he divorces her that he will never be allowed to take her back. If he still goes ahead and divorces her, he surely does so wholeheartedly, and he cannot claim later that it was a mistake. The rest of the Mishnah focuses on the second case, where the husband divorced her because she had made a neder. The previous Tana implied that he may not take her back under any circumstances, but the next Tana holds that there is a case where taking her back is permitted. Rabbi Yehuda says, if he divorced her because of any neder that was known to the public, i.e. she made the neder before 10 or more men, he may not remarry her. But if he divorced her because of a neder that was not known to the public, he may remarry her. According to Rabbi Yehuda, the reason a man may not remarry a woman whom he divorced on account of a neder is to punish her for being reckless with making nedarim. She deserves this punishment, however, only if she had made the neder in public, thus showing a severe lack of restraint, and not if she had made it in private. The third Tana of this Mishnah, Rabbi Meir, agrees with the first Tana that the reason he may not remarry her is to prevent him from claiming that the divorce was a mistake. Based on this, Rabbi Meir makes the following distinction. Rabbi Meir says, if he divorced her because of any neder that requires investigation by a sage, i.e., it must be annulled by a sage, and could not have been canceled by the husband himself, he may not remarry her. But if he divorced her because of a neder that does not require investigation by a sage, rather the husband himself could have canceled it, he may remarry her. According to Rabbi Meir, the concern that the husband might claim the divorce was a mistake exists only if her neder requires the sage to annul it. The husband could say that he would not have divorced her had he known that a sage could annul the neder. However, if he could have canceled the neder himself, there is no basis for such a claim, since he refused to cancel the neder and chose instead to divorce her. A fourth Tana, Rabbi Elazar, mentions that he may not remarry regardless of whether the husband could have canceled the neder himself or a sage is needed. Rabbi Elazar said the rabbis prohibited them to remarry in this case, where her neder requires annulment by a sage, only because they are prohibited to remarry in that case, where the neder does not require annulment by a sage, but could have been canceled by the husband. That is, Rabbi Elazar agrees with Rabbi Meir that the prohibition was enacted to prevent the husband from claiming that the divorce was a mistake. In his view, however, no man could claim that if he would have known that a sage could annul his wife's neder, he would not have divorced her, because it is presumed that a husband would rather divorce his wife than have her suffer the humiliation of appearing in a sage's court to have her neder annulled. Thus, in theory, it was not necessary to prohibit them to remarry in the case of a neder that requires annulment by a sage. However, if the neder could have been cancelled by the husband, he can indeed claim that the divorce was a mistake. He would be believed to say he did not know that a husband could cancel his wife's nedarim, and if he had known, he would have cancelled it and not divorced her. To prevent him from making this claim, the rabbis prohibited him to remarry. Once the rabbis made this prohibition, they strengthened it by adding that they may not remarry even in the first case, where the neder requires annulment by a sage. Until now, the Mishnah has discussed a neder made by a wife. If, however, the husband made a neder to divorce her and then divorced her, he is certainly allowed to remarry her. The Mishnah cites a story that supports this law. Rabbi Yossi, the son of Rabbi Yehuda, said, there was an incident in Sidon where one man said to his wife, all the fruits of the world should be like a konam for me, i.e. they should be prohibited to me like a temple offering, if I do not divorce you. And he divorced her. and the sages permitted him to remarry her. Their reason was that the prohibition to remarry, discussed above, was enacted only for the benefit of society, that is, to prevent the husband from claiming that the divorce was a mistake and thereby harm his ex-wife and children. If, however, the husband himself made the neder, and so he cannot claim that the divorce was a mistake, the prohibition does not apply, and he is allowed to remarry her.